The ballroom at Varexon Global shimmered with gold light and soft music. Crystal glasses clinked while executives laughed near the stage. I stood near the back, holding sparkling water, watching quietly. I never chased attention. I believed good work spoke for itself. For the past year, I had rebuilt our shipping and vendor system. The changes saved the company $14.2 million. I worked late nights without complaint. I greeted the cleaning crew by name. I treated interns with respect. That was simply who I was. My supervisor, Alistair Crown, stood near the CEO. He looked flawless, like he stepped out of a magazine. Tall, sharp features, perfect suit. People admired him. They did not see how his smile never reached his eyes. CEO Ilias Verdun stepped forward and raised a glass. "This year changed everything," he said proudly. Then he looked at me. "And Ilara Vale," he added warmly. "I hope the bonus helped after that incredible restructuring project." Applause filled the room. My breath caught. "What bonus?" I asked softly. Then I turned and looked directly at Alistair Crown. The music seemed to fade. Silence spread across the ballroom. The CEO blinked. "Your performance bonus," Ilias said slowly. $250,000. Approved 6 weeks ago. The room buzzed with whispers. Kept my posture straight. "Sir, I did not receive any bonus." Alistair laughed lightly, as if the moment amused him. "Payroll timing can be tricky," he said smoothly. "There is probably a delay." His hand rested on my shoulder. To others it looked friendly. To me it felt heavy. Ilias frowned. "Finance confirmed the transfer." I shook my head. "My bank account shows no deposit." Within minutes, the CFO checked the system from his tablet. The record was clear. Bonus. $250,000. Status. Disbursed. Confirmation number attached. The applause had turned into stillness. I felt eyes on me, but I refused to panic. I trusted facts. Facts always win. "I am sure this will be resolved," I said calmly. Alistair's jaw tightened for a second. Only a second. Then his handsome smile returned. "Yes," he agreed. "It will." But his eyes were sharp now. And for the first time I sensed something far deeper than a payroll delay. The next morning I arrived before sunrise. Tomas the security guard greeted me kindly. "You handled last night with grace," he said. Smiled. "Kindness matters most during storms." By 9, I sat in a glass conference room with HR, finance, and internal audit. Alistair entered last, confident and composed. The payroll record showed my name clearly. Ilara Vale. Bonus amount confirmed. Then they opened the bank routing file. The account number was not mine. "That is incorrect," I said calmly. "I have never used that account." Audit examined the approval form. My name appeared again. A digital signature matched mine almost perfectly. But it was not mine. Alistair leaned back. "Perhaps she updated her details months ago," he suggested. His voice sounded helpful, but his eyes watched me closely. Audit pulled the transaction log. The routing change happened 3 hours before final release. It required a manual override. "Whose credentials approved the override?" the audit director asked. The room went quiet. The system displayed one name. Alistair Crown. For the first time his perfect smile disappeared. Alistair cleared his throat. "That must be a system glitch," he said sharply. "My credentials handle dozens of approvals each week." The audit director remained calm. "We will verify." I folded my hands neatly. Inside I felt steady. I had learned long ago that panic clouds judgment. Calm exposes truth. Audit pulled deeper logs. The payment had not gone to a personal account. It was sent to a vendor profile. Vendor name. Crown Strategic Consulting. The air felt heavier. "That vendor has existed for 3 years, finance confirmed." "Who owns it?" Audit asked. Alistair paused only briefly. "Private investors," he replied. Something in his tone changed. The warmth was gone. What remained was control. As the meeting ended, a full forensic review was approved. All bonuses for the last 2 years would be examined. When we stepped into the hallway, Alistair walked beside me. "You misunderstood the situation," he murmured quietly. "You should have stayed silent." His voice was smooth. His words were not. I looked at him calmly. "I did nothing wrong," I said. His eyes hardened. By Friday, the investigation had widened. Audit discovered 7 additional employees whose bonuses were redirected over 2 years. Each amount was small enough to avoid alarms. Total funds missing: $1.8 million. The board was notified immediately. Alistair moved quickly. He told executives I was emotional. He hinted that I managed vendor records. He suggested I might have altered files myself. Some co-workers grew distant, but many did not. Clara from accounting left tea on my desk. Junior analysts thanked me for treating them with respect. Tomas gave me a firm nod each morning. I had always valued people, no matter their title. The forensic team uncovered something worse. Crown Strategic Consulting was not just a shell vendor. It was connected to a private investment pool. That pool financed outside ventures tied to a member of the board. And that board member was not random. He was the CEO's brother-in-law. The case was no longer about my missing bonus. It threatened the entire company. And someone very powerful now had everything to lose. The board called an emergency meeting that Monday morning. I was not invited, but everyone felt the tension. Emails were short. Doors stayed closed. The usual laughter was gone. By noon, internal audit requested full access to vendor records from the past 3 years. That timeline mattered. Crown Strategic Consulting was created exactly 2 years and 8 months ago, during what leadership had called a temporary restructuring phase. I remembered that period clearly. Several vendor contracts had been moved quickly. Alistair told us speed was necessary for growth. I trusted him then. That afternoon, I was asked to provide any documents related to vendor routing approvals. I gave them everything I had saved: emails, timestamp screenshots, and archived approval chains. I had kept records because I value precision. I never imagined they would become protection. Later I passed Alistair in the hallway. He looked perfect as always. Controlled. "You are creating problems bigger than you understand," he said quietly. "I did not create this," I replied gently. "I just asked a question." His eyes narrowed. For the first time I realized he was not worried about embarrassment. He was worried about exposure. By Wednesday, the forensic accountants arrived. They worked quietly in a secured office. Hard drives were copied. Access logs were frozen. Audit confirmed something alarming. Every redirected bonus followed the same pattern. Manual override. Routing change. Approval stamped under Alistair's credentials. The amounts were careful. Never too large. Spread across departments. Quiet. Total confirmed misdirection: $1.8 million. But then another layer appeared. Crown Strategic Consulting did not spend the money directly. It transferred funds into an investment vehicle called Halcyon Growth Partners. Halcyon was tied to a board member, Dorian Halbrecht. Dorian was powerful, wealthy, connected. He was also CEO Ilias Verdon's brother-in-law.
The connections stunned leadership. The shell vendor had been approved during the restructuring period, authorized by the board itself, meaning the structure was legal at creation, but its use was not. That afternoon, Alistair requested a private meeting with HR. Rumors spread that he was preparing a defense. An hour later, I received notice that my system access would be reviewed. He was trying to shift suspicion. I felt fear for the first time, but I also felt steady. Truth leaves trails. My access review began Thursday morning. IT confirmed I had never logged into vendor routing controls. My permissions did not allow manual override. That fact cleared me quickly. Still, whispers lingered. Alistair began telling senior managers that I was ambitious and upset about recognition. He hinted I wanted attention. He suggested I misunderstood executive processes. His charm worked on some people. He was handsome, confident, and persuasive. He knew how to smile at the right moment. He knew when to lower his voice and appear thoughtful. But I had seen the other side. Late one evening months ago, I had watched him snap at an assistant for misplacing a folder. His tone was cold and cruel. He did not like mistakes unless he made them. The forensic team traced Halcyon's investment activity. Funds from redirected bonuses had financed 2 private real estate deals connected to Dorian. Those deals generated profit, meaning the stolen bonuses were not just hidden. They were multiplied. The board scheduled a formal hearing for the following Tuesday. Alistair's calm began to crack. He stopped smiling in the hallways. And he stopped speaking to me entirely. Tuesday arrived heavy and silent. The board gathered in the top-floor conference room. I was asked to provide testimony about my project timeline and compensation history. I spoke clearly. I explained how the restructuring saved $14.2 million. I confirmed I had never received any bonus payment. I showed bank records covering the last 3 months. The numbers were simple. No deposit. Dorian Halbrecht attended remotely. His image filled the screen. He appeared relaxed, almost bored. "This seems like an internal accounting confusion," he said smoothly. But the forensic team presented digital logs. Manual overrides. Timestamp matches. Routing confirmations. Then came the key discovery. The vendor account for Crown Strategic Consulting was registered under a holding company linked to Dorian's investment group. Silence filled the room. Alistair finally spoke. "I followed board-approved structures," he said firmly. "Everything was authorized." The audit director responded calmly. The structure was authorized. The redirection of employee bonuses was not. For the first time, I saw sweat at Alistair's temple. The board ordered a deeper external investigation. The matter had moved beyond internal discipline. It now carried legal risk. By the end of that week, outside counsel was engaged. Federal compliance guidelines require disclosure due to possible financial fraud. The company's stock dipped slightly. News had not broken publicly, but investors sensed instability. CEO Ilias Verdon looked exhausted. He requested a private meeting with me. In his office, he closed the door and spoke quietly. "I approved your bonus in good faith," he said. "I trusted my leadership team." "I understand," I replied gently. He studied me for a moment. "You stayed calm that night." "Why?" "Because facts are stronger than emotion," I said. "And I care about this company." He nodded slowly. Meanwhile, investigators confirmed the redirections were intentional. The routing overrides were executed under Alistair's credentials from his assigned device. There was no evidence of system breach, meaning it was not hacking. It was choice. That evening, security discreetly escorted Alistair from the building pending review. As he walked past my desk, he looked at me with cold fury. "This is not over," he said quietly. For the first time, I believed him. The following Monday, Virexin Global felt different. Security badges were reprogrammed. Access points were monitored. Alistair Crown was officially placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Rumors spread fast. Some said it was just politics. Others believed the evidence was clear. I focused on my work. I continued refining vendor efficiency reports. I greeted the front desk staff each morning. I answered junior analysts' questions with patience. Kindness does not pause during crisis. External forensic auditors arrived with deeper tools. They imaged Alistair's company laptop and reviewed deleted files. What they found shifted the case. There were encrypted folders. Within them were spreadsheets tracking redirected bonus amounts. Columns listed employee names, payout dates, override timestamps. My name was listed first. At the bottom of each sheet was a calculation of projected investment growth. The numbers matched Halcyon Growth Partners. This was not random misuse. It was organized. That afternoon, outside counsel informed the board that criminal exposure was now possible. The situation had moved beyond internal discipline. It was now federal territory. And Alistair's silence grew louder. 2 days later, Alistair requested to speak before the board in person. He arrived sharply dressed, composed, and confident. He knew how to command a room. I was asked to attend as a witness. He spoke calmly. The restructuring model allowed flexibility in vendor routing, he explained. Funds were temporarily parked for strategic deployment. His language sounded polished. But audit presented evidence that employee bonuses were never intended for vendor deployment. They were direct compensation. Alastair shifted his tone. I operated under strategic guidance, he said carefully. From whom? The board chair asked. There was a pause. Then he said it. From Dorian Halbrecht. The room went still. Dorian joined remotely again. This time, his expression was tense. I never instructed illegal activity, Dorian said firmly. Alastair smiled faintly. There are emails. For a moment, it seemed like two powerful men were circling each other. The board ordered immediate seizure of all related communications between Alastair and Dorian over the past 3 years. The investigation was no longer quiet. It had become a war of blame. By Thursday, investigators uncovered email exchanges between Alastair and Dorian during the restructuring period 2 years earlier. The language was coded. They discussed temporary liquidity repositioning and performance-based capital redeployment. But the dates matched redirected bonuses. Even more troubling, Dorian had invested personal funds into Halcyon shortly before each major bonus redirection period. It suggested awareness. The CEO was informed immediately. Ilias looked shaken. His brother-in-law had been part of family dinners for years. Their children played together. Trust had existed beyond business. Now that trust was cracked. Meanwhile, Alastair's legal counsel argued he acted under board authority. Dorian's counsel denied involvement. The company's stock dipped again. I stayed focused. I continued cooperating fully. I provided archived reports that showed my bonus eligibility timeline, confirming I had no knowledge of any vendor routing changes. Every fact tightened the net. By Friday evening, federal investigators requested preliminary documentation. This was no longer internal corporate cleanup. It was potential financial fraud. And someone would soon fall hard. The next week, federal agents interviewed senior executives. They examined financial flows between Crown Strategic Consulting and Halcyon Growth Partners. The transfers were precise. Funds moved within hours of bonus disbursement. It was not accidental timing. It was synchronized. Alastair's tone changed during interviews. He stopped denying redirection. Instead, he claimed it was strategic compensation restructuring. But the policy manual was clear. Bonuses could not be rerouted without written employee consent. There was none. Meanwhile, Dorian's financial records showed profit distribution from Halcyon investments funded directly by redirected bonuses. The numbers spoke louder than any statement. Inside the company, employees grew anxious. Some feared layoffs. Others feared reputational damage. I continued showing up early. I helped interns finish reports. I treated the cafeteria staff kindly. Integrity must be visible in crisis. One afternoon, CEO Ilias asked to speak privately again. My family is involved, he admitted quietly. But this company employs thousands. His voice carried weight. He was approaching a choice. And that choice would change everything. Friday morning, the board convened an emergency shareholder session. It was scheduled urgently. Investors were notified of material governance concerns. Before the meeting, I saw Alastair one last time in the hallway. He was no longer smiling. His confidence had thinned. You think this ends with me? He said softly. I held his gaze. It ends with truth. He looked almost amused. Truth depends on power. Inside the session, CEO Ilias Verdon stood before shareholders and delivered a statement. He disclosed internal findings. He confirmed redirected employee compensation. He acknowledged potential involvement of a board member. Gasps echoed through the room. Then, he did something unexpected. He announced that Dorian Halbrecht was being suspended pending investigation. Family ties did not protect him. The board voted to remove Dorian from financial oversight immediately. Federal authorities were formally notified. The room felt electric. The company had chosen transparency over silence. But the investigation was not complete, because one final discovery had not yet surfaced, and it would expose just how deep the scheme truly ran. The week after the shareholder meeting, federal investigators formally opened a case. Subpoenas were issued for banking records tied to Crown Strategic Consulting and Halcyon Growth Partners. The deeper review uncovered something even more troubling. The redirected bonuses were only part of the flow. Additional funds had been moved through vendor overpayments, small increases in contract values, minor adjustments few would question. Together, they added another $900,000 over 2 years. Total exposure now reached $2.7 million. Alastair denied wrongdoing again, but his defense shifted. He claimed he acted under strategic orders and implied the board wanted higher investment returns. Dorian denied any knowledge of specific employee bonuses. But forensic mapping showed exact timing between redirections and Halcyon investment surges. Patterns do not lie. Inside the company, tension grew heavy. Clients began asking quiet questions. Investors watched closely. CEO Ilias met with regulators personally. He pledged full cooperation. That same afternoon, agents arrived with a formal warrant to seize Alastair's personal devices. His calm mask finally cracked. As he exited under supervision, employees watched silently. For the first time, his power looked fragile. 2 days later, the breakthrough came. On Alastair's personal laptop, investigators discovered a secure messaging app. Messages between him and Dorian were stored in encrypted threads. One conversation stood out. Alastair wrote, "Next payout cycle includes Vale's restructuring bonus. Funds will be rerouted. Halcyon tranche prepared." Dorian replied, "Yes. Timing must stay clean. Keep individual amounts modest." There it was. Clear coordination. No confusion. No vague language. Intent. The evidence was presented immediately to the board and federal agents. Dorian's legal counsel attempted damage control, claiming messages were taken out of context. But the timestamps matched payroll release dates perfectly. The pattern was airtight. That evening, federal agents issued a formal arrest warrant for Alastair Crown on charges of financial fraud and conspiracy. He was taken into custody quietly to avoid media chaos. When news spread internally, some employees felt relief. Others felt shock. I felt something else. Sadness. Not for him, but for the damage greed had caused. Still, the investigation was not finished, because one final financial layer remained hidden. Forensic accountants expanded the review beyond the company. They traced Halcyon's downstream investments. What they found raised the stakes again. Profits generated from redirected bonuses were partially reinvested into a new startup logistics firm. That startup directly competed with Virexin Global, and it had been quietly courting 2 of our major clients, meaning the stolen bonuses did not just enrich individuals. They funded a potential competitor. This revelation changed everything. It suggested strategic sabotage. Dorian held minority shares in the startup through an indirect trust. Alastair's encrypted files contained draft business models matching internal Virexin strategies. The betrayal was deeper than theft. It was conflict of interest at the highest level. CEO Ilias convened another emergency board session. This time, his tone was firm. "We will not protect family at the expense of our company," he declared. A formal civil lawsuit was filed against Dorian and Alastair jointly. Regulators expanded the investigation to include market manipulation concerns. The crisis had reached its peak, and the final public reckoning was approaching. Media coverage began 3 days later. Headlines mentioned executive fraud and board-level misconduct. Virexin's name was attached to every article. Stock volatility increased. But something unexpected happened. Investors responded positively to the CEO's transparency. The market saw decisive action, not concealment. Internally, employees gathered in small groups. Many thanked leadership for choosing truth. I continued my work quietly. I answered questions from junior staff. I reassured teams that compliance systems were being strengthened. One afternoon, CEO Ilias called me into his office again. "You could have reacted emotionally at that dinner," he said thoughtfully. "You could have accused loudly." "I believed facts would surface," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Your calm forced clarity." Meanwhile, federal prosecutors finalized charges against Dorian Halbrecht, including conspiracy and misuse of corporate funds. He resigned from the board officially. Alastair remained in custody awaiting arraignment. The crisis seemed near resolution, but one final decision remained, and it would define the company's future. At the next quarterly company-wide meeting, CEO Ilias addressed all employees directly. He explained the fraud in clear terms. He confirmed arrests. He outlined new compliance systems and oversight layers. Then he did something powerful. He acknowledged my role publicly. "Alara Vale's integrity triggered this discovery," he said. "Her question protected this company." The room grew quiet. I felt my face warm, but I stood calmly. He continued, "We will build a stronger structure from this moment." After the meeting, he asked me to remain. "I want you to lead a new division," he said. "Compliance and risk strategy." Independent reporting line to me. It was more responsibility than I expected. "I will accept," I said carefully, "if we commit to full transparency always." He smiled. "That is exactly why I am asking you." Later that evening, I walked past the now empty office that once belonged to Alastair Crown. His polished desk was gone. Power built on deception does not last. But integrity does. One final chapter remained, and it would close the circle where this all began. 21. 6 months passed. Federal court proceedings moved forward steadily. Alastair Crown pleaded not guilty at first, but the encrypted messages and financial trails left little room to argue. Eventually, he entered a plea agreement for reduced sentencing in exchange for cooperation. Dorian Halbrecht chose a different path. He denied everything publicly, but civil and criminal cases tightened around him. Investors distanced themselves. His startup funding collapsed. Inside Verexin Global, the atmosphere slowly stabilized. As head of compliance and risk strategy, I built stronger internal controls. Vendor routing required dual authorization. Manual overrides triggered real-time alerts. Employee bonuses were now confirmed directly with recipients before release. I insisted on one simple rule: transparency over speed. Teams responded well. Morale improved. One afternoon, I passed Tomas at the entrance. "Things feel lighter," he said. "They are," I replied. Integrity had become policy, not just principle. Meanwhile, sentencing hearings were scheduled. The scandal that began with one quiet question was nearing its legal conclusion. But closure would not come from court alone. It would return to where everything started, at a work dinner. 22. The following year, Verexin hosted its annual executive dinner again. This time, the atmosphere felt different. Less flashy. More grounded. I wore a simple navy dress. I stood near the same wall where everything had begun 1 year earlier. But I was not the same person. CEO Ilias Verdon stepped onto the stage once more. He spoke about resilience, about difficult choices, about accountability. No one mentioned the scandal directly. They did not need to. Then he paused. 1 year ago, a single question changed this company, he said. The room grew quiet. He looked at me again. "Alara Vale, thank you for protecting Verexin Global." Applause filled the room. But this time, it felt steady, not startled. He continued, "This company does not reward silence. It rewards integrity." I felt a calm warmth, not pride, because this was never about praise. It was about fairness. Later that evening, finance confirmed performance bonuses had been deposited. Mine included. The amount was accurate. The account number was correct. And for the first time, there was no question. 23. 2 weeks after the dinner, final court decisions were announced. Alastair Crown received a federal sentence for financial fraud and conspiracy. His professional licenses were revoked permanently. Dorian Halbrecht faced significant financial penalties and separate criminal proceedings. His business ventures dissolved under scrutiny. The competitor's startup collapsed entirely. Virexen's stock stabilized. Investors cited restored governance confidence as the reason. Internally, something deeper had changed. Employees began reporting concerns earlier. Managers documented approvals carefully. Ethics training became meaningful, not routine. One afternoon, Clara from accounting visited my office. "You changed more than policy," she said. "You changed culture." I smiled gently. Culture was always there. It just needed light. I never sought revenge. I never wanted headlines. I wanted fairness. The crisis had revealed something powerful. One calm voice, backed by facts, can shift an entire structure. But one final conversation remained. A quiet one. And it would close the last emotional chapter. 24. CEO Ilias invited me to his office, once more. He looked thoughtful, not tired. "I need to tell you something honestly," he said. He explained that when the dinner incident first occurred, some advisors suggested minimizing the issue. Quiet settlement. Internal correction. No public disclosure. If you had reacted with anger, he admitted, it might have been easier to dismiss. I listened carefully. "But your calm forced us to examine everything," he continued. "It removed the option of silence." He paused. "I almost protected family. But you protected the company." His honesty meant more than praise. "I simply trusted the truth," I replied. He nodded. Before I left, he added, "Leadership is not about power. It is about responsibility." As I stepped outside his office, I realized something important. The scandal was never about money alone. It was about character. And character, once tested, reveals everything. 25. 1 year and 1 month after that first dinner, I walked into the ballroom again for a smaller leadership event. The lights shimmered just like before. But this time I stood at the front, not the back. I thought about the moment I asked, "What bonus?" That question did not come from anger. It came from clarity. Alistair Crowne once believed power controlled truth. He was handsome, confident, and skilled at deception. But deception requires silence to survive. When silence breaks, structures fall. As I addressed the leadership team about ethical growth, I spoke simply. "Systems matter," I said. "But people matter more. Protect each other." After the event, I checked my phone. The latest quarterly incentive had been deposited. Accurate amount. Verified routing. No overrides. No shadows. I smiled quietly. Because this time, when the CEO raised a glass and asked if it helped, I knew exactly what was in my account. And more importantly, I knew exactly who I was.